Hi, everyone. Good morning, good noon, good afternoon. We will give another couple of moments to everyone to join, and then we'll kick off the webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Well, again, good morning, good noon, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. People are still entering the Zoom link, so we'll give another couple of moments and we will start. All right. So hi, everyone. Thank you again. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about how to backup your databases in minutes and restore, how to backup them in seconds and restore in minutes, while also reducing costs and doing so with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. Will talk all about running self-managed databases and how optimize those workloads on AWS. My name is Semyon Mazor. I'm a senior product specialist here at NetApp, focusing on FSx for ONTAP. And I'm very glad to be joined here today with Phil Boating. Hi, Phil. Good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Simeon. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone's keeping cool in this heat wave. I'm Phil Botting. I'm a storage specialist solution architect at AWS, based in the UK, supporting our UK and Ireland businesses across the storage portfolio.
So thank you thank you again for joining me on a short notice. And also I hope we'll stay chill during the session and during the next couple of days. So what we've planned for the agenda, we'll start with kind of the basics, starting about different options to run databases on AWS. We'll talk about the challenges of running databases, and then how FSx ONTAP can help overcome those challenges, optimize self-managed databases. We will also dive a bit deeper and visualize that within architectures, and we'll show a hands-on demo on how to backup databases, how to restore them, and how to create clones. This session is live. It is also being recorded and will be available by probably tomorrow on our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A panel, and we will try to address it during the session, but we will definitely dedicate time at the end to address all your questions. So you're very much welcome to send any question you have, and we're here for that. So just to know better our audience today, we have our first poll. And just to get understanding of how much you are familiar with FSx ONTAP. So there's three options there. I use it for data storage on AWS, meaning you're already using it. Second option, perhaps you learned about it, but doesn't use it yet, which is a great situation to be here, or just a very little knowledge about it, which is also a great option. Actually, all three of them are fitting because we will give the basics and then go more into details. So please select the most relevant options for you here. Phil, I guess you see, do you see more familiarity with FSx on your daily work? Do you have an estimation what will be here, the answer? What will be the majority?
It'd be interesting to see, but I think somewhere between I use it and have learned about it because lots of businesses already use NetApp. So I think maybe lots of people familiar with ONTAP, maybe not so familiar with the FSx offering. So it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, let's see the results. All right, so we see kind of split between the three options. Actually, the majority, 45%, have little knowledge about it, 32% learned about it but doesn't use it yet, and 24%, which is also a great number, already using it. Actually, databases is one of the leading workloads, of course, in addition to file workloads. which is kind of the bread and the butter. So in any situation you are, this is great. We will introduce workload factoring and explain how you can optimize your databases for that. First, let's start with this from the end, the result, right? With the customer story. And this one is about Bank Japan, a bank with over 30 million customers. And they were running on-premises SQL Server infrastructure, and they decided to modernize it and to migrate to AWS. Now, they were using on-premises always-on availability group license, which means always-on availability group architecture, which means the enterprise license. And they had a very strict policy for backup and recovery. They needed to schedule backup every 5 minutes and to retain the last 144 copies, which meant 193,000 copies per month. A lot of copies there. And while architecting, trying to understand what is the best architecture for them on AWS, they've understood that FSx for ONTAP would be the only option that can actually meet their SLAs for RPO and RTO, which, as you can see on the slide, is 5 minutes for RTO, 2 minutes for RTO, very aggressive, as you would expect from a bank, right? They migrated 40 terabytes of financial data. They're using 300 business application on top of this architecture. And on AWS, they can actually move from always-on availability group to FCI, failover clusters instances, allowing them to reduce SQL Server licenses by 20% and then cut an annual cost support by another 21%. And in addition, while doing all that, they also could use the deduplication technology with 175% ratio of deduplication and also thin clones. So overall, they could save 51% on storage costs. So this is kind of one story to illustrate what FSx ONTAP can provide for organization, meeting very high demanding SLAs for RPO and RTO, while improving architecture, reducing costs, enhancing operations. So this is kind of one story for databases. Now, this is one example, but is definitely not the only one. There's dozens and hundreds of customers using it for databases, many more. There's dozens of public customers, particularly for databases. There's many other organizations that using FSx for ONTAP for databases, for different options for databases, as well as for others, but we will focus today on databases. So with that in mind, let's go back and start from the beginning. There's different options of running databases on AWS. Phil, can you please introduce us to the different offerings and the different options, and what are the considerations between the different options there?
Sure, can do. Next slide. Yeah, here we go. So if we start on the left-hand side with our relational databases, starting with Aurora, which is our own database engine that is Postgres, MySQL compatible. This has its own customized storage layer, which is designed for high parallel throughput. And we have RDS, which is more of a single tenant solution. So think of it as an instance that you've sized, and then you provision storage to that. So you can choose from GP3, GP2, IO2, and so on. And then we have our non-relational databases. So DynamoDB, probably the most prevalent one. These serverless offerings for non-relational workloads. And on the right, we have some analytical services such as Elastic MapReduce, OpenSearch, and managed service Kafka. And in addition to this, with the emergence of Iceberg, we have a managed solution for that. So that's called S3 Tables, which you may have also heard of. So the two options you have in AWS, so we have our managed services on the left-hand side. You can see the engines that we support there, so including DB2, SQL Server, and Oracle. And if you want to do self-managed, then this is where you provision your own EC2 instances. You'd then provision the underlying storage, so you can choose from EBS and FSx. For databases, you would usually use FSx ONTAP because that's the only one that supports iSCSI for block storage.
As always, AWS has this wide offering for different situations to meet customers' needs. And then if we focus particularly on relational databases, there's essentially generally two options, right? The fully managed option and the self-managed. What are the different considerations between those two options?
So consideration would be, as you see on the right-hand side, things like fine-tune configurations. So what we mean by this would be you need to have certain kernel configurations. You may have an application that you need to run on the same server as your database. So this is where you'd have to run self-managed. And you may have a license which is expiring sometime in the future, but you want to move the workload. So you can take that license with you to AWS. It also means you can install the engine of your choosing, you can install any version you like. And also, there are some considerations around the sizing. So some businesses are running very large size servers with lots of databases on the same piece of compute. And to pick that apart might take a bit of effort. So some customers like to move to the cloud first, as is, and then they brought their data to the cloud. It's closer to the AI services and analytics services that we offer in AWS, and then we can modernize later.
Yeah, I think the last point is a nice one. Of course, there's the like practical consideration of whether it's a company mandate to go to fully managed or self-managed, and there's some restriction, like you said, like with licenses or perhaps versioning or sizing. But there's also the psychological aspect, like to having the control while moving from on-premises when you do everything, and then you move to like part that's managed by AWS, and then you still would like to have that control to have the configuration done by yourself, and perhaps in the future to move to and then like to modernize even further and to give like to have the fully managed options and not having all done by yourselves.
Yep.
So today we're going to focus on the self-managed options, and assuming this is the right the right deployment for you. And now we're going to talk all about that and how you can optimize that. So we'll start with the challenges. And running databases comes with several challenges, and actually they're not relevant where you're running the databases, on premises, in the cloud. There will be a couple of challenges that usually will appear, starting with the resilience aspect to make sure it's up and running whenever needed. Then to make sure it maintains low latencies with high performance and the application gets the reply from the database on time. There's also aspect of maintaining point of view across different environments. Any organization has more than one database, sometimes hundreds of different databases, and there's a need to maintain this point of view across those databases. So in many cases, it involves copying processes, ETL processes, or backup and restore processes, which are time consuming and multiply the capacity and the cost. So this is another challenge. And the fourth is always cost optimization is always a concern, and teams need to stay on budget. So those are kind of the four main challenges. Phil, when customers trying to understand how to migrate to AWS, where you feel are the main concerns, where are the challenges that are stressing the most?
Yeah, so cost and performance is probably one of the most common themes we see. Obviously, there's some effort involved, so business want to make sure that there's benefit to this. But also on the left-hand side, there's resilience and protection. With AWS has a fairly unique way of isolating workloads, so customers like to take advantage of multi-availability zones and easily deploying cross-regional services. So I'd say those are the main things we hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is practically what we're going also to cover today on how you can do that and optimize that, right? But let's now ask our audience, with the people on the call today, what is your primary challenge? And regards on protection particularly, but it's kind of all connected together, right? So first option is challenge of meeting RPO or RTO targets. Second, managing backup complexity. Third, controlling costs. And fourth, maintaining point-in-time view across multiple databases. So please select the most fitting option for you. We're kind of focusing a bit more today on the data protection aspects, but we'll like all of them are connected to each other, and we will talk about all of them together. Do you feel any guessing?
Um, this depends on the audience a lot of the time, doesn't it? So if you're
Yeah.
more senior within the firm, you're going to be worried about costs. But if you're running this, I guess the top two, so complexity and meeting your recovery targets.
Yeah. All right. So let's see the results.
Okay.
All right, pretty much as you said. So we have 34% controlling costs and then kind of split between managing complexity, meeting RPO, and maintaining point in time. So all of them are relevant. This is, I guess, what we can take from here. Like all the challenges are relevant. And what's nice about using FS6 for ONTAP in this case is that you don't need to compromise on any of those. Like you can get all of them. So we talk about challenges, and one way to, or kind of the approach to overcome building different workloads on AWS is using well-architected framework. So Phil, what is the well-architected framework?
Yeah, so it's a set of best practices for each of the pillars that you can see on the screen. We have a list of best practices that you can compare your deployment against, understand the pros and cons of certain deployment methods. And to take this further, there is a well-architected framework review, which is a set of questions that you can run through. Or if you have an AWS account team, you can request a guided review of those pillars.
Cool. Now, the challenges we talk about are actually very much aligned with those pillars. Of course, all of them are relevant, but we're focusing on the four main challenges related to databases. So if we talk about the availability and resilience, it falls into the reliability pillar. Maintaining low latency, of course, falls into the performance efficiency pillar. The cloning aspects and maintaining point-in-time view across databases falls into operational excellence, and then obviously cost optimization goes with cost optimization. So to optimize all and meet the well-architected framework guidelines, FS6 for ONTAP is a very good choice for running databases. It's an intelligent storage service for well-architected databases on AWS. Of course, not only databases, but we are talking here on databases. And this is an AWS native service. Phil, can you like walk us through the full offering for storage
Yeah.
services?
Sure. So if we start in the middle with today's subject, this is part of the FSX product set. So FSX means file system X, and the X is the variable here. So we have four offerings. So we have ONTAP Windows, Lustre, which is a high performance file system for parallel workloads, and we have ZFS as well. So these are similar to RDS in the way that they are single tenant solutions. So an instance with a file system on top, high performance network and storage underneath. And then we have our more native services, so Elastic File System. This is where you provision a file system, and then you don't need to provision anything else. So you don't need to provision capacity or throughput. You get mount targets, you mount them on your instances, and away you go. And then we have Elastic Block Store to attach to EC2 instances, and our object storage service, S3, which turns 20 years old this year.
So I think the main takeaway point here, of course, AWS has a wide set of offering, but that FSx ONTAP is an AWS native service. It's provided, supported, built by AWS, fully native service, and not a marketplace solution, a fully native solution. And what's unique about it, that it utilizes NetApp technology. So all the great technology that NetApp has developed over the last 30 years and used by so many customers with the full rich enterprise grade storage capabilities are available natively on AWS. We'll not go into all the technology. It's way too much to cover in this webinar, but generally speaking, there's 5 pillars of those technologies, starting with accessibility, with unified storage for both file, block, and object storage, multi-protocol accessibility, then second pillar for resiliency protection with high availability, and backup DR. We'll talk all about that. Third pillar for data security with building autonomous ransomware protection, immutable storage option, etc. Fourth pillar for price performance. We will dive into this in more for more details. And 5 pillars, which we'll also cover for data mobility and copies with different options for cloning, caching, replicating data, etc. So all this available as part of FSx ONTAP. And now it's time to open the 4 challenges that we already covered and see where all this technology meets each and every of those challenges and those pillars. So we'll start with the reliability. And as we said, meeting RPO RTO is one of the most important target, having efficient backup. So what FSx ONTAP has to offer is first high availability. This high availability is by default. It can be in the same availability zones or cross availability zone, which is unique on AWS. FSx ONTAP is the only service that can offer block storage high available across availability zone on the storage layer. And it's very important because it can simplify the architecture. We'll get to the architecture, but this is a unique, very important capability to meet high availability requirements. Then the first layer for the data protection is application-aware snapshot. Those snapshots are NetApp snapshot, very lightweight, very efficient snapshot. And they provide the first layer of protection against any logical failure. So you can quickly restore those snapshots. They're stored on the same file system and provide the first layer of protection. Then those snapshots can be replicated to another file system, which can be in the same region or in different region. This is replicated very efficiently with the built-in cross-region replication technology called SnapMirror. And this way you can have second layer of protection against physical layer. And again, it could be in the same region or in different region, and then easily meet also DR requirements. And then another layer of protection, if required, could be with backup, which again can be another copy if there's a need to meet the 3-to-1 backup policy, etc. So all of them could be achieved very efficiently with FSx ONTAP using this snapshot technology and the replication technology, using NetApp tools or with AWS tools as well.
I'd just like to point out, this shows the flexibility and options around availability that you have using FSx. So even within the same availability zone, you'll have an HA pair. And these, if you're familiar with placement groups, there'll be some form of infrastructure protection even within the same availability zone. And then, as Samin said, we've got replicated storage for cross availability zone. So that means within the same region, you have synchronously replicated storage between availability zones. So that's really good for a lot of customers' resilience posture. And then we do have integration with AWS backup as well. So that means you can just set AWS backup to back up your volumes. That will be on a nightly schedule. So you don't have to configure SnapVault. But again, because this is ONTAP running in AWS, you get the full feature set. So you can choose to run SnapVault to a separate file system if you choose. So there's lots of flexibility with the service around reliability, certainly.
Yeah, as you said, reliability, backup aspects, DR aspects are one of the most important aspects for running databases. And I think it's not the only way, the only aspect that FSx shine on, but in many cases, this is the only piece of infrastructure that can make really the difference, like we saw with the example of Banco Pan, but also other very large organizations could meet their strict SLAs, RPO and RTO targets by using those storage technology for high availability, snapshot replication, etc. I see there's a couple of hand raisers. So if you just want to remind, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A panel and send the questions over there. This is the way we can see your questions and reply to your answers. Otherwise, we'll also reach out offline and try to address any questions you have, but we will be glad to using this time we have today here on the webinar to address your questions. Now it's a good time to have another poll, the third and last one for today. We would like to ask in this context of data protection, how confident are you in your current recovery capabilities? Very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, or not sure? Now, Phil, when you're having your daily conversation with customers, what's usually the situation you face with them? How would they say?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I used to run these systems on premises before I joined AWS, and I know that it depends on how often people test their recovery. and what situations they're testing against. I think in light of recent events you see in the news last year, recovery has become a very hot topic. So it'll be interesting to see what people's views are on this, how often they do test the recovery capabilities, or whether it's just a case of they have backups implemented and think that's
Yeah,
enough.
I think there's also trends which are not new, but are becoming even more visible with data growing, especially with the AI now, and also
Yeah.
ransomware, which is here is a major concern for a couple of years already. So all that become very relevant. How you protect huge amount of data, also protecting you from ransomware and making sure you have a recoverable copy of your data. So actually, our audience feel pretty confident. Around 40% feel very confident, and another 40% somewhat confident, and the rest not sure, not confident. So where this is the situation, I assume you would be glad to have it while you move to AWS. So this is also, so you're in the right place here. All right, let's move to the next pillar for performance efficiency. And we said low latency for database are a must. It's not something that you can compromise on. And FS6 will ONTAP has all the features to make sure you don't need to compromise on that. So first, it provides high throughput with up to 36 gigabyte per seconds on the network I/O. Then it has unique caching technology with in-memory cache and NVMe cache. So in many cases, some of the caching, some of the compute things done on the EC2 layer, done now on the storage layer. So it also can reduce sizing of the compute in some cases, but also make sure that the performance that you get are meeting the requirements. And then there's hundreds of thousands of IOPS provided by FSx ONTAP using SSD disks up to 200K IOPS. So all that makes sure that the databases get the high performance it needs from the storage. Anything that you have in mind, Phil, in this context?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting to see. I mean, we got the caching with ONTAP. It's very, very powerful. And this applies to reads and writes. One of the things around ONTAP is that it's really good at taking high write workloads as well as reads. So this is really, really good, obviously, for database workloads.
Cool. So high performance, moving to the next pillar now, operational excellence. So we already said there's need to maintain a point-in-time view across different databases. In many cases, it's a challenge because you need to copy those databases. We see customers having hours for each and every copy, and in some cases, they need to do it every day or, as we saw, every couple of minutes. So what FSx Frontal provides is the option to use, we already mentioned the snapshot, which are highly efficient. And then those snapshots can be spun up for a full writable copy accessible to the databases. And what's nice about this technology is that it's not involving any actual copy movement. So it's only using pointers to the original data, meaning they are created in seconds. They do not affect the performance of the database or the storage. And therefore, it is very efficient in terms of the capacity and in terms of how the cost, right? So we'll talk in a cost more in a moment, but I would like to highlight here the speed of creating those environments. There's no actual data movement, but from the database perspective, it's a fully writable copy that he can work on. So those teams that need to access different databases, whether it's dev test environments, pre-prod, schema validation, QA, whatever it is, those teams that working on those environments can access those databases very quickly. So it has impact way beyond the IT aspects. It has an impact on the actual operation of the business because the different teams can now work faster without waiting for the data to be refreshed. Do you see it common, Phil, such situations?
Yeah, this is one of the key advantages of ONTAP, and it's so popular with customers. When we're talking about cloning environments, maybe large databases, several terabytes and beyond, and you can create up to hundreds of copies. So previously, I've seen where we've had maybe just over 100 terabytes physically used, but logically provisioned, it's over a petabyte. And this is where it comes into its own when you scale up the deployments to large databases. large environments, you've got lots of dev teams that want to work on a copy of the production data. This is really powerful. And you can also, if you want to, split off the clone, make it a full independent copy to use elsewhere. And that's done very quickly as well. I think we touch on that a bit more in a demo as well.
Yeah. So I think this is one of underestimated feature of FS6 ONTAP, especially when you're trying when you're not familiar with ONTAP, because like mainly the discussion on snapshot and backup or DR and these aspects, and of also performance and cost. But then in many situation, organization understand this very powerful feature, and sometimes there's also reaction like, why haven't you told me that there is such a great technology? And then it was like, but we did. So we're trying to explain from the first place that it can be a real game changer, first for the operation, but then also for the cost itself.
Yes, and also what we do see as well is customers will take the production data, have that snap mirrored to DR, and they will do the cloning off that. So if there's any concern around impact to production, put snap mirror on top, do on the DR side. It's really simple, and as it is ONTAP, it integrates with Snap Manager, Snap Center, because again, it's ONTAP.
Absolutely. I think this leads us to the fourth pillar for related to cost optimization. And there's several layers here of cost savings. We're generally saving that customers can get up to 50%. We actually see customers getting even more. Even I saw a customer with 65%, 68% cost savings. This applies to the storage, but not only, also to other layers. So let's unpack what we actually mean here. So starting with the storage layer, there's storage efficiencies, which effectively reduce the data footprint your workload consume on FS6 ONTAP with deduplication and compression technology. So they make sure that the initial 100% of your data are less than 100% and smaller. Then the snapshot that we mentioned are highly efficient. So it's not a full copy and not anything related to that. It's just another additional friction of the capacity with changes, especially when there's many of them. So they are incremental. So the change is saving only the changes that are done. And then there's also tiering technology that makes sure that you get the right balance between the performance tier and the capacity pool. So everything that did not require the high performance of SSD will reside on the capacity pool, saving on storage costs. For databases, it would be in most cases a snapshot only on the capacity pool because, as we said, the databases need the high performance, the SSD, but it also can have an impact on your storage cost. Next layer is the thin cloning. As we said, it enhances the operation, but it also has a huge impact on costs because if an organization have 500 copies of 500 databases, without such technology, it means 500 times the capacity. With thin cloning, it would be only one practically because the initial one is less than 100% thanks to the storage efficiencies, and then the other copies are just additional friction of the data. It starts with no additional capacity, only the changes that write on those clones starting to actually accumulate additional costs. So the impact here can be very high on costs. Next pillar related to high performance. So first, all the high performance parameters that we mentioned are configurable. So you can turn them up or down according to the needs and to the environments that you are using it. And then also some of the things done on the compute layer can be moved to the storage layer. So you can use smaller EC2 instances as well. So you can save on the storage cost, but also some piece of the compute. And then more impactful related to the compute cost, because how FS6 is built within AWS, you can right-size the EC2 regardless of the network bandwidth or regardless of the performance you need from the storage. So you can use FS6, it's decoupled from the compute. Regardless, you can set the right parameters for the workload and then select the most fitting EC2 server regardless of the performance you need, unlike with other options. So this is also a way to optimize and right-size the EC2 selection. And last pillar related to the database licenses, because again, there's a replication technology on the storage layer, you can, in many cases, move to a smaller license. For example, in SQL from always one availability group to FCI. And in this case, if it's something, if the enterprise license are used mainly for the replication and for the data protection, so in this case, you can also save on licenses, again, as we saw in the example at the start. So all those all together can be very impactful. Generally, we're saying 50% of storage cost, but also for the overall TCO of the workload.
Yeah, and this just highlights how multiple features within ONTAP create this efficiency. So you start with thin provisioning of the volumes. You provision a volume that's not capacity used, that's just consumed as you go. Thin clones and the storage efficiency just works together. And when you add this on top of each other, it creates all these savings along with the customization. So you only provision what you need. As Simon said, network bandwidth, IOPS, these are all configurable. So you only have to provision what you need.
Yeah. I see there's a question about if this can be used only for cloud environments or also for on-prem. So we're focusing here today on FS6 for ONTAP, which is an AWS service. So of course it's available in the cloud and in the context of running databases in the cloud. But this is a version of ONTAP, fully operational ONTAP. So any features we mention here are part of ONTAP that can be run on premises. And one of the common situations is having hybrid setup with part of the workload running on premises and then part of it on AWS. It's a major situation or a very common situation when there's kind of a phased approach to moving to the cloud or just using it for hybrid situation for backup of some part of that.
Yeah. We see customers now extending their on-premises infrastructure into AWS because they can leverage SnapMirror. So say they have a DR facility, maybe there's a lease expiring, they need something quickly. Obviously, you can spin up a file system in minutes. So we see customers extend into there. And there's an additional benefit that you're replicating your data into AWS. You can also access your file system via an S3 access point. And this allows analytics and ML services to access your data as if it was an S3 bucket because these services are S3 compatible, don't usually use file. So that's an additional value that you can bring by using the service.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any more questions, please send them through the Q&A panel. So we covered the different aspects of technology FS6 want to provide. Let's bring it more into life. Let's visualize that and let's demo it. So in terms of architecture, this kind of bring together the different aspects we talk about. This is a common, we took SQL Server as an example here. It's applied for other databases as well. It would look pretty similar. What we see here is two availability zones. Each of them has its own SQL node running on EC2s, and then FS6 ONTAP as a shared block storage, or if you prefer file storage, but in most cases it probably would be block storage shared across the availability zones with each of the SQL nodes has a network interface with automatic failover. So this is an FCI architecture with one shared block storage, highly available with all the snapshot cloning technology with high performance that we mentioned. Now, when it gets even more interesting is when we add a DR aspect to that. So on the left side, you still see the same architecture, multi-AZ file system for two servers with synchronous replication. And then we have another deployment in another region, in this case, with FS6 ONTAP with additional server. And this is how you get the DR, the replication done on the storage layer with the cross-region replication technology, SnapMirror. This is asynchronous replication. You can free up compute from that and free up the databases from doing so. So this is still an FCI architecture, meeting, again, as we said, can be very demanding SLAs for RPO and RTO. And as Phil said, on the second region, you can run the clones and create those different copies of the environments. So this is totally separated from the production databases in this case, and making sure it doesn't have even any minimal impact on the production. So this is kind of bringing together what we discussed here: 2 regions, 2 availability zones, built-in replication, etc. Let's see if we have. All right. So let's move to the demo, and then we'll address any further questions. So what we will see now is a demo of SnapCenter, a free of charge tool provided by NetApp that can be used for FSx ONTAP, of course. And we will see backup and restore processes for 3.1 terabyte of data, and also cloning of them. So starting with that, we'll see here the SQL Management Studio. SQL Management Studio, just a moment, with 2 databases, TPC 1000 and TPC 30,000. The first one is 147 gigabytes. The second one is 3.1 terabyte. So we see both of them here, and we first would like to take a backup of them. So now we're moving to SnapCenter. We see the different databases that are seen by SnapCenter, including the 2 databases that I mentioned. And we can see the policy, the schedules of the backup. We see full backup, system backup, and TLog backups for each of them. The 2 are daily, the 3 are hourly. And we will go to the 147 gigabyte and take ad hoc backup. The system will ask us to approve that we would like to have ad hoc backup on top of the scheduled backup. And let's look on the logs and see how long it took us to create this backup. What we can see here, that it took us 9 seconds, 50 to 59, to create 147 gigabytes of data. Now let's take a backup of the 3.1 terabyte database and see how long it takes. So we're taking an ad hoc backup, confirming that we would like to do it on top of the scheduled backups. And then we're looking on the logs to see how long this one took. And we see in this case, 23, again, 10 seconds, right? No, not 9 seconds to create 3.1 backup of 3.1 terabytes. So 9 seconds for each of them. Now we're going back to the SQL Management Studio, and we would like to make some changes to the database to see the difference, right? So we will add some data here, starting with kind of a clean view of that, and then we'll add some information to make some changes to our database. So now we have a bit more information on the databases, and let's go and take another backup after we've done the changes. So we can ad hoc backup for the 3.1 terabyte of data, and we'll look at the logs to see how long it takes us to create those. And what we see that it took 12 seconds, right? 12 seconds to create this backup, 3.1 terabyte. Now, let's restore, assuming that the changes we did were by mistake, and we would like to restore the previous copy, the previous point in time of our databases. So we are going to restore 3.1 terabyte of data. Let's see how long it takes. Now, this is, of course, a recorded demo. We will go through the wizard. First, we'll restore the database to the same host where the backup was created, kind of override the original information. There's also options to make it to a different location. We'll choose the type of recovery. We would like to do a full. We would like to override the databases with the same name during the restore. We also can make sure if we would like to use additional transaction log. Those SnapCenter makes it the application, the snapshot aware of the database. So there is no need for log for shipping activity, log forward activities. We can choose if we would like to get a notification over emails, summarize that, and run it. Now this is a shortened, of course, the video. We will not wait for the full process, but we will look on the logs. And what we can see here, that backup of 3.1 terabyte took 8 minutes. So when we say backup in seconds restoring means this is what we mean here. So now we're going back to the management studio to run the database and see if the backup was successful and if we actually restore back to the situation we had. And what we see that we don't have the table anymore, so the backup was successful. Another step is to use the same snapshot and now create clone and to cover this aspect as well to kind of refresh different environments, right? So again, pretty similar wizard here, selecting the clone server, the instance, and the name to where we would like to clone the data of that database. We will auto-assign mount point. Then we go to the next part. Options to related to logs. We would like to have full logs. We also can run scripts before and after the cloning aspects. We choose the notification and we approve the summary. And now SnapCenter create a clone of that database. So let's see how long this one took us. And we see 30 seconds to create a clone of that databases. So again, 3.1 terabyte, 30 seconds to create another copy of that. And if we now refresh it, we'll see another copy, TPCC 30,000 clone, which is the new copy. So this is to showcase how practically what we discuss, creating backup in seconds, restore in minutes, creating in seconds another copy of the databases, all that comes into practice. This can be used with SnapCenter, as you saw here. Again, it's free of charge for customers using FSx ONTAP. It also can be leveraged with other tools using the same technology. So if you have a backup vendor that you are using for different environments, you can also utilize them. Most, if not all of them, has integration with NetApp and with the snapshot technology. So this is kind of bring to life what we discussed. All right, so we're getting to the end of what we prepared for today. So let's have a kind of a summary with what we discussed and what are the next steps. So you probably already got it. FSx ONTAP can optimize databases workloads on AWS. There's four main aspects of that. First, with powerful protection, meeting RPO and RTO targets with application-aware snapshot, disaster recovery, and backup. Then it provides high performance through high throughput, high IOPS, and smart caching. It provides unique cloning technology to create new database environments in seconds and refresh existing databases with near zero costs. And it can optimize costs by reducing roughly 50% of your workload costs with thin cloning using smaller EC2 instances and all the storage efficiency technology that we covered. Phil, what is your take for this here?
Well, I think the key is, this has so many features that work really well with databases. We've got the replication with cloning and high performance, and this is what databases need.
Absolutely. All right. So, our audience on the call today could think, all right, this sounds good. So, what's next? How we start? And also already see there's a question about how a migration would look like. So, the first and the most practical step to do is to run an assessment. Phil, would you like to explain us what is an AWS assessment?
Sure. So with a storage assessment, we essentially help you run DII, which is a NetApp tool. This will give you a 30-day trial license to run the collection. This will then be sent to our collector. We will analyze that data and then give you some sizing information. So this will size at the individual volume level. It'll give you some tiering suggestions as well, because you can customize how the tiering of the volume is done, whether that needs to be enabled or not. And then some indicated cost around the deployment. And we'll give you single availability zone estimate, multi-availability zone. And if you want backup as well, we can give you indicated cost for that also.
Yeah, I think it's a very good way to understand what you have, what would be the right way of doing it on AWS. And just reach your AWS or NetApp account to having storage assessment and run this. Another option is kind of perhaps a smaller step to that is use Workload Factory. It's another free of charge service by NetApp. You can simply go to console.workload.netapp.com, create your account or using NetApp SSO if you already have one, and run a cost analysis. It could be on information you provide there or connecting it to your existing deployment on AWS, and it will analyze including all the best practices, all the small configuration that you might know or might don't know, and Workload Factory will take that in account and provide you the potential cost savings that you can get. And if there's no cost savings, it would also present that as well. It is utilizing AWS calculators as part of the calculation. There's also capabilities to deploy the databases and then implement best practices into existing deployments and make sure it aligns with well-architected best practices. So this is another option to kind of understand how you can benefit from cost savings and also optimize in terms of the configuration and all the best practices. With that, I think it's a good time to move the Q&A and see what we have there. Please, if you have any questions, just send us through there. So I think this one is for you, Phil. How would an integration with FSx ONTAP in an existing AWS customer infrastructure look like?
Yeah, so I think this depends on where what the source is. So I assume this is like a database on EBS. So you've got a few options here. You could potentially use Volume Manager, Mirror, because you essentially with iSCSI, there'd be a new LUN, so maybe you could use Volume Manager, Mirror to the new underlying storage. Replicate via database, I guess, if that's available as well. There's a few options, I would say. If you do have account team with NetApp or AWS, then we'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Yeah, I think one of the situations which is not rare at all, I think, is migration from other storage services to FSx ONTAP, right? Not only from ONTAP to ONTAP. So what are the options there? If, for example, like migration from EBS to FSx ONTAP for databases. So there's different tools, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the summary of situation is covering, really. I mean, it's probably mirroring would be my choice, or you just create another environment and replicate to that. Depends on the database engine as well, and what features you have enabled.
Yeah, there's also a couple of tools, like a couple of another vendors that you can use to run this block migration, etc. All right, there's a question about the supported databases. Like we use SQL here as an example, but practically we talk about self-managed databases. So any database you install on that, actually the whole value propositions are relevant for them as well, whether it's Oracle databases, MySQL, Postgre, etc. So if you use self-managed databases for them, you can have all the snapshot, high availability, replication, cloning technology, high performance. It's all relevant for them. It will change in terms of the naming. The architecture would be different, but it still applies there. One very common, of course, is also Oracle, which we see there. It's a bit different, but it's still very similar to what we talked so far. All right. If there's more questions, so please send them us through. All right. How is the application awareness of the database managed implemented? Great question. So one way the snapshot could be application aware or not application aware. So in any tool you will create snapshot, it will be created, they will be crash consistent. But then with tools like Snap Center, you will make them application aware. So Snap Center is one example to use that to make them application aware. What Snap Center does is actually uses a plugin to connect to the database itself, and then it QSs it, taking the snapshot, and then continues, and then make it application aware, making sure it's fully recoverable, and therefore there's no need for log forward activities. Anything to add here, Phil?
No, I think you summed up pretty well. I mean, this is the fundamental feature of snapshots is that we're not copying any data, we're just marking the blocks to be referenced by a snapshot so that if it's updated, it's not deleted. So you can still go back to the point in time. So this is why snapshots are so quick, because you're not deleting anything, you're just marking it as referenced. And that means that you only need the IO to be quiesced just for that period of time. A snapshot can be taken, and then you have your snapshot and can build a clone of that. With Oracle, slightly different. It would put it into backup mode, so freezes the headers, the SCN is all consistent. That's then taken, and then database goes back into its normal operating mode.
All right, there's another one here. I would be glad if you can take it. How viable would it be to run a database server on an on-prem VM with database data in FSxN over Direct Connect?
Yeah, we wouldn't recommend that just because of the latencies involved here. If you wanted to extend into FSxN, you could possibly make it a backup target, I guess. So you could, and you would have to mount over a VPC. It'd have to be private VIF, and then with a VPC interface endpoint. So yeah, not to run live data, but you can certainly probably pump it back up across into AWS.
Yeah. For a specific configuration situation, also please raise hand. We will reach out offline and we'll be glad to have a more in-depth conversation for the specific case you have and to support you with different consideration and the best architecture to implement any specific situation to more details. This is the last call to send your questions before we wrap up the session. And so if you have any additional questions, any things that we would like us to clear to dive into more aspects, so this is the time to send it through the Q&A panel. Meanwhile, I'll just summarize this thing again. We started with one example. There's so many more, like just dozens of public customers, so many other organizations using it. What's also interesting that ONTAP, FSx ONTAP is positioning very much towards existing ONTAP install base, existing customers using ONTAP and now having ONTAP in the cloud. But what we see is that roughly 50% never heard about NetApp or ONTAP before, just because the capabilities it provides in the cloud, the unique set of being block storage, highly available, all the things they mentioned, snapshotting, cloning, etc. So it's nice to see this adoption by organizations that are not using ONTAP on premises, but understand the benefits it provides. All right. With that, I would like to thank you all for being with us today, and I hope it was useful. Phil, thank you so much for being with us
You're
here,
welcome.
presenting here.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a nice rest of the day, and see you next time.